Okay, go for it.
Okay, welcome everybody. I would like to call the regular board meeting of the Wenatchee School Board on April 28th of 2020 to order. And I'm used to saying we'll now stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance, but we won't be doing that. The first item on our agenda this evening is our consent agenda. And on the consent agenda, we have the minutes from the April 14th regular meeting. We have vouchers and payroll, a personnel report, a surplus report. We have contracts, and we have a monthly board memo regarding the March financial report. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move, this is Michelle, I move approval of the consent agenda as listed.
And this is Martin. I will second that motion.
Great. Is there any discussion? And we will do a roll call vote. So in the order that I see you on the screen, Martin,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Maria,
Aye.
and Laura's aye. Motion passes. Thank you. So at this time, we have citizen comments, and I maybe should have said that at the beginning. On our website, there is a link to a form which can be submitted by anybody who wishes to address the board at our regular meeting, and that form goes immediately to Kim, our executive assistant, and that gives folks who are watching and would like to address the board that opportunity. Kim, do you have any forms? I don't see anybody.
I don't. I see no emails to my email address.
Okay. Okay, great. Let me know if any come up, since we were a little bit late in making that announcement. We got off to a quick start.
Okay.
Okay. So next on the agenda, we have a presentation regarding secondary grading.
Thank you, board. Yeah, tonight, Mike Lane, Executive Director of Learning and Teaching, will be speaking with the board and the community about student learning or grading during the COVID-19 crisis and what it looks like. So I'm excited for Mike to talk to the board about this different time. And I think that's the key component here, that this is really a unique time and these grades are going to look different than they have before. But with that, I'll hand it to Mike.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you everybody for having me here tonight. When the shutdown first happened, one of the first things that districts went to work on collaborating around was, what is grading going to look like in this historic time? And Superintendent Chris Reichdahl asked districts to pause on their discussions and their plans on that because OSPI was going to be sending some guidance out. The guidance didn't come out exactly on time, but eventually did come out. It came out last week. And I believe that Paul sent this to the board last week, so you've had a chance to review it. And if not, it is hot linked in the title of that first slide. Ron, you can slide up on that first slide if you would, please. Thank you. So this is, I want to review for you some of the main components of the guidance from OSPI around assigning student grades at this time. First and foremost, and Superintendent Reichdahl was crystal clear on this, sort of our educational Hippocratic oath is to do no harm during this time. Additionally, he did away with the ability to assign pass or fail grades, or for us to assign incompletes for students. He left it open to individual school districts to determine how they're going to assign letter grades or an incomplete for any student that is unable to engage with us in an equitable way, with the caveat that Fs will not be an option. So no student will be receiving an F during this time. Students who are assigned an incomplete for a course will be given opportunities to re-engage in those learning standards and to change that incomplete to a passing grade. And we would extend that even into next school year. And then additionally, every class that's taken during the closure period will have a statewide designator on the high school transcript that will denote that the unique situation in which the course was taken. This guidance fortunately aligns pretty well with the direction that we were heading as a school district, with the potential exception of assigning letter grades. And one limitation of the guidance is that it leaves it open to interpretation, so that there is the potential that 294 school districts across the state are all trying to create unique systems for assigning letter grades. Shortly before this guidance came out, the Association of Washington Schools Principals, AWSP, put forth a proposal that they were supporting, and it started to gain some real traction across the state and across the nation. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that, because it acknowledges kind of the unique situation that we're in right now, and it honors the unique challenge of assigning letter grades during this time. So, Ron, if you want to take us to the next one. So, and again, I believe that Paul sent this to the board last week. If not, much like the other slide, the complete document is hot linked in the title there. For a short title, we're going to call this proposal A's or Incomplete. And there's really two main components of this. The most important one, quite honestly, is that teachers are providing ongoing feedback to students and families regarding progress made towards essential standards. That is currently happening. That was the first place that we went to. We knew we didn't have an answer yet for what the transcripts were going to look like, but we knew a key component to this new model of teaching and learning was getting feedback to students and families. The other component of it is at the end of this grading period, students who were able to complete their assignments and engage with us to an extent possible, given their situation, would receive an A on their transcript. If the students were not able to do that, then they would receive an incomplete, and they'd be given the opportunity to re-engage in the learning standards. We believe that this is the best path forward to get us through this historic time. And in the next slide, I'm going to talk to you about some of the challenges with the traditional model of assigning letter grades. This is kind of poor form for a presentator, but I'm going to read you the slide bullets, and then I'm going to give you the background that goes along with them, because this is a little bit odd the way we're doing this. So a couple concerns about if we were to adopt your traditional approach to assigning grades during this time is that those traditional grading practices potentially expand the opportunity gaps that we already know exist, and they may really lack relevance during this time. Our schools and our school buildings and the services that we're able to provide within those buildings when we are open, that's what serves as the equalizing force for students and families. That's what we're able to use to kind of level the playing field. Without that, we might actually be grading access to technology or dependable Wi-Fi or food or housing or security, which is concerning. Additionally, there's the potential for real long-term negative consequences for our students related to college acceptance, scholarships, access to majors, and on. So it goes without saying that this is not business as usual, and unprecedented solutions are required. We can just take a step back and look at the federal government, what they're currently doing with stimulus checks. They've put a pause on student loan repayment. Statewide, we've paused on teacher evaluations. The state has canceled the previously required state assessments. The state has given school districts the ability to waive graduation requirements. Locally, we continue to distribute meals and resources to our families, even though our buildings are closed. We've turned one of our elementary schools into a daycare for first responders. We've distributed over 3,500 computers and 1,200 iPads. And we've hosted staff technology trainings with 650 to 700 participants in order to fundamentally shift our instructional model. These are all unprecedented solutions. So our thinking around how we grade needs to reflect that same level of innovation. If we try and overlay our pre-COVID mindset about grading right now, we run the real risk of assigning grades based on student privilege instead of student learning. For our families, they are all experiencing clear and present real life danger, and they're in different levels of crisis. We can't possibly take all of the stress into account to accurately grade student learning. Our focus needs to be on providing grace and providing support. And as far as long-term consequences, equity needs to be at the center of our mission right now. If we were to allow a student's B grade, for example, to fall to a D because they had to take on new responsibilities to help their household survive this crisis, then we will have failed to have upheld Superintendent Reichdahl's #1 rule, which is to do no harm. The next slide, Ron. Some considerations about this plan. The errant incomplete model ensures that students are not penalized because they have less advantages at home than other students have. Many districts are adopting this. Many have already adopted this. So by us moving in this direction, we would be consistent with Eastmont, Seattle, North Kitsap, Mercer Island, Bellevue, Bellingham, and several others that are having these exact same conversations, quite honestly, probably right at this exact same time. This is a solution that does no harm, and it is equitable. We cannot allow doors to be shut for our students due to no fault of our students. And quite simply, this is a very humane solution during an unprecedented time. Our students in our community have lost their school year. The grief for that is real, especially for our seniors. And the fear and uncertainty in the community is also real. This is a solution that provides grace and hope and a place for us to move forward from as a community. One concern that has been raised and probably will be raised again is the one around fairness, in that there is the potential for a student who maybe in the past has not put in the level of engagement or work or study to earn an A during this grading period may receive the same grade as a student who has consistently done whatever it takes to earn an A. And to that concern, I would simply say, yes, that is true during this historical time. Here's what I'd say is also true. 25 years from now, Wenatchee School District students will be studying in our schools the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, and they will be evaluating the way the leaders, our US leaders, our Washington state leaders, and our local leaders responded. It's my hope that the conclusion that they draw is that locally our decisions were guided by equity and compassion, and that we had the courage to face extraordinary challenges with extraordinary solutions. And that last bullet, I'm going to pass off to Paul.
Thank you, Mike. Outstanding presentation. As you can see by Mike's presentation, a lot of time and thought has gone into this, working with our high school principals, as this is currently a high school issue, along with a few of our middle school courses that are high school bearing. Our high school principals have all spoken with their staff. They had conversations about it. The majority of our staff understand this practice and are supportive of it. And I just want to hit the point again that Mike spoke about a few times around equity. And the board's value of equity continues to drive the work we do in trying to think about each and every child. How do we best do this for all students? Not some, not a few, not our highest achieving or those who have struggled in the past for whatever reasons. What we've tried to do is ensure that our students, that we're making the best decision for kids, short-term and long-term, so they have those doors available to them, whatever they may be. The state has will put a COVID-19 document or stamp on those transcripts that will tell, all of the colleges and universities around what was occurring at this time. And I think a piece to remember, it's not just for our high school seniors. This is for those freshmen, for those 8th graders, those transcripts that will take a number of years before they're in high school. And it's an important piece to remember this moment in time and in this one semester of time. But I'm really proud of the amount of time that we've spent speaking about it, but we really had to wait until OSPI came to us to give us the guidance. And from there, we moved further and making sure that we were communicating with the board, and then our staff. And we're here at this point. And tonight's not the end of this piece. We really want to hear from our board. We're going to open up a public comment for the next 10 days for our parents, for our students, for our staff to give us feedback. And that will be going out tomorrow around the opportunities that we're making available, or if there are some pieces that we're missing. So we really want to make sure we hear from all of our stakeholders, including our students, as we go down this. But really what I want to do now is hand it over to the board to ask Mike or myself any questions you may have around where our thinking is at.
Good. I just first want to say that I think it's so important, what you said about reaching out to the stakeholders. That is just a critical piece to get that feedback from students, staff, and parents in particular. And I don't know if everybody watched the video that Chris Reichdahl played. The link is in our WSD news brief that we get in our email. And he left it to each district to decide whether we would we would use all the grades, A through F, or we would use 1, 2, or 3. We could use A's and B's. We can use A, B, C. We could use them all. We can use incomplete. So we have the freedom to do whatever it is we feel is right for our district. And he felt like the individuality of every district warranted having a different situation. So I think the interesting thing about that is the playing field. Once our kids move outside of our district, especially for seniors, an A is not going to mean the same thing out in the world as an A might otherwise have, because not everybody's on the same scale anymore. So that's one thing that strikes me. And then you listed 6 districts that we are consistent with in this proposal. We have some, 300 districts in our state?
About 250, somewhere in that range.
Say it again?
About 250.
250. So does that mean 244 chose a different variety?
It means that we know those ones.
Okay.
They haven't listed out. I was just on the state today. Nobody's putting out what everybody's doing. I think as Mike alluded to, many people are having this conversation tonight or this week with their boards, because this information from OSPI came out last Tuesday, right before our 4 o'clock meeting. So we're not too deep into this. So
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Oh, you look like you want to say something. Or no?
Could I say something?
I do.
Yes, please
Go
do.
ahead.
Michelle, I see Michelle's looking like she wants to talk.
Oh, I have a question related to what the board was told last week, that we have a percent of students who are not able to connect, whether it's due to Wi-Fi issues, technology, or whatever at-home reasons. And I think it was 25 to 30 or 35%. Is that right, Paul?
We're hovering right now about 20%.
Okay.
So that seems to be where we're at. But yeah, it's still a significant amount of students who for whatever reason.
So I guess my question pertains to that 20% that's still not connecting with their teachers. So they would, I assume, automatically get an incomplete if we're not hearing from them. But maybe you could tell us what efforts are being made to that you've reduced that number down to 20%, and how we're going to still try to capture every student, so that 20% is gone and we have every student gets an A or an incomplete, depending. Hopefully they don't get incompletes if we've connected with them, but I really do appreciate that this really is an equity issue. And although I know there are lots of students that try very hard and work very diligently for A's, this COVID-19 is really showing our differences in the community, and where poverty really has a huge impact on learning for our students. So I appreciate all the efforts that our district has done to get devices out and Wi-Fi hotspots, but there's still going to be a little bit of inequities. We're doing our best, I know. So I do appreciate that, that this is a very thoughtful plan to not penalize students who do not have privilege. And but I would really like to know kind of the steps that we're taking to reduce that 20% down to 0 if possible.
Okay, I'll start and then Mike can jump in as well. So it's a multi-tiered approach, from starting with our teachers, trying to make sure that they're engaging. That's that first level of interaction, is that teacher level. And that's tried again. When that's not working, we're reaching out, our teachers are reaching out to our administrators. We're trying to make sure that we're making contact to the parents of the children. We're also engaging our social workers or our counselors or our parent liaisons, who are also doing some of that work. Some of our buildings are looking at also using our SRO in different ways, just trying to use the resources available to us to engage our students on a very one-to-one basis, and hoping that we can have some contact. There are some issues with accurate email addresses. There are issues with accurate phone numbers. So we don't always have the most accurate information. Mike, I'll hand it to you.
I don't have a whole lot to add to that, Paul. That was where I was going to go with that, to the point where after multiple attempts for the teachers and the teacher teams to get in contact with our families, we're getting creative and getting in cars and going out and looking for folks. Our social service folks, they already had caseloads of students that they were working with, so they've been trying to contact them above and beyond technology needs. But that's just kind of been the approach that we're going to continue to take, is go out and find as many of these families as we can.
And to add one more piece, and it really goes to Maria bringing this up to a group, the IT team that we were talking about a week ago, really trying to make sure that we're also doing just the kind of the old-fashioned signs of connecting with us, and making sure we're putting up posters in the communities to say, if you are not connecting with us, here's a way to connect with us. Really trying to go old school on the community, because we know not everybody sending an email or a telephone blast is not working for everyone. So we got to crack this 20%. We really do. And that's an effort we push forward to our principals, and they're continuing to work with our staff on that.
Martin, you were,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
I have a question on the incomplete part. I listened to Superintendent Rakedahl, and he listed 6 ways in which an incomplete can be converted to a grade. And just in case, I had to go back and copy it down off his video, but one was summer school, doing the course next year, online, independent study, competency-based, and an interesting one, move to the next content level, get a grade in the next content level, and then it gets backfilled to the one you had an incomplete on. So my question is that representative of what we are planning to do, or what's the other part of how we would work on the incompletes during the next, let's say, 18 months, I would guess?
I would say we would use all 6 of those different possibilities to try and get our kiddos where they need to be. That we really view that it's our responsibility to make sure we don't have a lot of incompletes, and that if we do have incompletes, that is really a collaboration and a communication between instructors and administrators on what led to that being an incomplete. Was it a technology issue? Was it an engagement issue? Was it a lack of work issue? What was the problem that led to this? Our goal would be to not have a bunch of those that we're going to need to backfill.
Yeah, but that list of remedies, is that a specific and exclusive, or is that something that the district would work on with whatever percentage, hopefully well below 20%, are there trying to make up? Is it how much discretion are you likely to have?
I would imagine we would have a fair amount of discretion in doing makeup credits. I mean, that is more of a local decision. I think that Chris Reichdahl probably put those in there as great examples and guide points, but probably not as a limiting factors.
Okay. Thank you.
What I would add to it, Martin, it'll also probably be student specific as well. Because as Mike mentioned, we're hoping to have a pretty small number of students with an incomplete that we really know what would probably work best for that student. We're in partnership with the student, we're in partnership with the parents to really talk about what does this look like for Paul, and how will Paul best be able to respond to this incomplete.
Julie?
I guess I have a question on those lines. I understand the transcript is going to report, the A or the incomplete. Are students going to have, who are participating, going to have an ability to better track their progress? Are teachers going to be able to give feedback kind of like, at the middle school, the 3, 4, here's what you would be at with your participation at this point, or what we're seeing? Or does that make sense? I mean, just so that they can, those who are participating, granted the transcript's going to read one thing, but those who are engaging, your private profile, your teacher's tracking your homework and going to be able to tell you, yeah, you've made improvement from last, last semester. Is there any feedback happening there?
And that's the point I was trying to get to, that kind of 2 components to the plan. That first, most important one being that teacher feedback to students and families. We're also talking about ways that we can include student self-assessments. That has a very high results factor when students are actually assessing their own progress towards meeting standards. That's what's currently happening. That's the bulk of what this is about. What shows up on the transcript, as Paul and I were kind of talking last night in the middle of the night and trading texts and whatnot, we really kind of gave both of ourselves permission to kind of slow this process down a little bit, because the actual assigning of an A or an incomplete comes later on in the process. What is happening right now, Julie, is exactly what you're talking about, where teachers are giving direct feedback to students and to families based on how they're doing on those standards. That is what is most important in this.
In one of our PD sessions that Ron and Ray Burke have been offering, and the tech offerings, our educators are signing up. I mean, almost every one of them are sold out. A sold out session is anywhere above 250. We're usually right at that marker. But Ron was presenting a way for tracking student progress. So teachers had the ability to have a tool at their disposal to be able to use that. Some of them were for student tracking and some of them were for staff tracking. So that is a big piece of it. Actually, Diana Haglund showed me a screenshot of one of her kids and the progress reports that she's getting around what's occurring for one of her students. So it's happening, but what we're working towards is making sure that that's occurring across the board for all of our educators and all of our students, which we know that's an area we want to continue to improve upon.
So in regards to engagement, what does that mean? So is there something that, so you engage, you get a A? What does that mean? Is this daily engagement, weekly engagement, bi-monthly? I mean,
What's the threshold?
Yes, yes, thank you. Because obviously we know, I mean, there's not going to be any assessment. So how is an letter grade A being issued in regards to engagement?
Well, I would, I'll answer that, but I would say there will be assessments. It's not that we are not going to assess student learning. We're just not going to be assigning grades in a traditional way where, for example, you take a test, I correct the test, and based on the results of the test, I assign you your letter grade. We absolutely are going to be assessing student learning during this whole process. So what engagement looks like, that's the part that does get somewhat tricky. We borrowed some of the language from Seattle. Seattle, being the biggest school district in the state, was the first to really step forward and say, we are absolutely doing this. And the language they're using is that students are able to engage to the extent possible given their circumstances. So that will be somewhat individualized, and it will be somewhat up to teachers and administrators to be communicating with those families. So going back to, if we have students who perhaps are not engaging to the extent that we would like to see, it falls on us to reach out and find out what the problem is. Is this a technology issue? Is this an understanding issue? Is this a family in a different state of crisis issue, so that we can make judgments that are accurate and equitable. So it's not probably as cut and dried, Maria, as what traditional schooling is, but that's kind of that grace and that compassion piece that we're trying to go for during this time.
And actually, it's a piece that, a lot of our teachers are very stressed out. I mean, this has been a really challenging time, and my gratitude for our educators and the work they're doing, because it's not just delivering an asynchronous lesson and then having a synchronous open office hours. Because if you were to think about it like that, wow, that seems like about 2 hours a day that you're doing it. But what they're doing is assessing student work. And then it's all these engagement opportunities. I'm hearing from teacher after teacher after teacher. It is the amount of conversations, emails, exchanges that they're having with students and parents, all to Mike's point, to know, where are you at? How are you doing? Because this whole thing is wrought with inequities. And everything that we're trying not to do is base a student's grade off of their home life and their wealth, because that's the biggest fear, is that we're assessing you based off of your mom and dad's or your grandparents or your guardian's income level, and that's something we got to be really cautious about, and why we're pretty adamant as to where we're at with it, because we believe that this is the best thing for all students.
So I just have another follow-up question on the percent of students that are not engaging, that 20%. So when we look at age distribution across the district, is it pretty even? Yeah. And
really
I'm also wondering about special populations like special ed, ELL, migrant population, and other. Are they overrepresented, or are they represented about the same percent?
Yeah, good question. And it's one that I don't have an answer for you tonight. Okay. But we will put that on my questionnaire to see where are we at, because it's been more of a general question, but at each grade level, because one of the things that did surprise me is that it's pretty consistent, 20% at elementary, middle, and high school as well. But we will dig a little bit deeper into that. Who are they? Mm-hmm. Is it an overrepresentation of some special populations?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this might be a silly question, but what kind of impact does an incomplete have on a high school transcript?
Well, the interesting thing about incompletes is that traditionally they've not been allowed to remain on a high school transcript. So I believe that OSPI is still working on that piece, but that is somewhat ironic that was one of the options they had given us, because previously, in my previous time in Vancouver working at a high school, you were forbidden to ever have an incomplete on a high school transcript. That had to be changed to something else. And so that would be the approach we would probably take, because colleges and universities don't really know how to deal with an I on a transcript. So the goal is that we're not sending anybody out with an I on their transcript. We're getting back with those folks into the next school year to get that changed to a grade.
And that was a question today for State Superintendent Reichdahl, and that was not answered. So they know that that's still a piece that needs a solid answer.
Okay. Anything else?
No, just one more quick reminder. We will be sending out information to all of our stakeholders. We really do want feedback that helps make sure that we've thought of everything. And I know we can't think of everything, but here's an opportunity to give us that feedback around our thinking. And that's going to be a 10-day open comment period time.
That's great. Okay, so now we have a presentation on pre-K through 12 school start and end times.
Yeah, Mark Helm, Assistant Superintendent Mark Helm, is going to lead this. And this is a conversation that honestly started back in July at the cabinet level as I became more and more aware of our transportation. And one of the things that I learned were some of our students were on our bus routes for over 2 hours. And that just wasn't right for any of us. And we needed to figure that out. And part of that was making sure that we were getting the right technology, the right tools to be able to really think through how do we best utilize our buses, our bus drivers, and to service our students in the best way possible. So that was kind of that background, but it has taken us time to, one, get the technology, implement it, and then start using the tool to its full advantage. And that's kind of where we're at right now. And with that, I'll hand that off to Mark, as he's been leading this.
Yeah, so as Paul said, Jenny came on last year, kind of noticed some really crazy bus routes, really crazy ride times for kids on the bus. And so approached me with the idea of changing start and stop times. We were looking at some other issues district-wide around school start times anyway. So I said, hold off, we need to address some other issues first. And so these kind of two things meshed together with the bus routes, and then the school start time. So why are we doing this? Well, because we truly believe this is going to be best for kids and student learning. It's going to decrease the amount of time that kids have on the bus. And you have a document board. I'm not going to go through all of it with you, but just a couple of the key highlights. It's going to decrease the ride time for a lot of kids. It's going to create safer load zones. So currently, because of the nature of our buses, we have some buses loading while other buses are pulling into the bus stops, which obviously isn't safe. You got kids walking in front of or behind buses that are moving, not safe. You got kinder kids riding the bus with high school kids. That's probably one of the biggest complaints Jenny gets. So, and then we've got special needs kids who have to transfer buses. Again, not the best situation. So we also had a issue with school start times, in that we had 3 elementary schools that were meeting the contract as far as the length of the school day. The other 5 were not. They needed to add 15 minutes. So we worked with the principals on creating kind of a schedule that would work for all elementaries. And now we're all going to be at 6 hours and 45 minutes. So those two things came together into this new schedule that we are proposing. And as far as buses go, what that's going to allow us to do is create a 2-tiered system, meaning that the buses will go out, pick up elementary kids, bring them back, drop them off, go back out, get the secondary kids, and then drop them off. Routes will be more efficient. You won't see buses crossing one another's route and waving at each other as they go by. They'll have their own area. The other good thing about this right now, if I'm a student, I could potentially ride a different bus home with a different bus driver than when I ride to school. This will get rid of that. They'll have the same bus driver, everything. It's going to really help out our special needs kids. And it's going to actually decrease the number of buses that are being used, so that we have more buses available for those severe, profound special needs transportations that need to happen, and for our McKinney-Vento kids. So that's going to be a really big plus for us. So that loading zone issue I talked about, buses will be at the elementaries when they get out of school. Right now we have one school that has to wait almost 30 minutes for their buses to show up. That won't happen. The buses will be there, kids will get on, they'll go home. So that'll be good. I can answer more questions about that, but as you look down at that piece of that document that you've got there, as far as school start times, we need about an hour between elementary and middle to make this happen. Mostly because, let's just be honest, it's Sunny Slope and the Malaga Stamilt run. Those are the longest distance-wise. They take the most time. Those routes kind of drive everything else. So as you look at the schedule, and Ron, I don't know if you have that and can present it. We're proposing that elementary school start time is 7:45. Currently, we have 2 elementaries, Newberry and Columbia, that start at 7:50. So not a huge change for them. The other elementaries, it'll be a change. They start at either 8 or 8:15, so that'll be a big change for them. And then the secondary will start at 8:45. Currently, they start anywhere between 7:45 and 8:15. So, and then you can see Tech Center and ECLC, the impact it'll have there. So the last thing I'll say, then I'll answer any questions. What's our communication plan? So we put this together, we shared it with principals, got their feedback, sharing it with you. We've shared it with WNEA and PSE leadership, got their feedback. So far, everybody is, kosher with it. We all recognize that this is going to change things for really everybody, staff and parents. We recognize that we still have to figure out some minor pieces like the after-school activity program buses, sports buses, daycare buses that take kids from, for example, Lincoln to Mission View for daycare. But those are all things Jenny is confident can be solved, that they're not going to, disrupt this whole plan. We recognize that, maybe parents currently are relying on their secondary student to be home when their elementary student gets home so they can take care of them. This may change that. We get all that, but we really do believe that this is best. And again, for secondary kids, you've got a link to a research study that talks about how secondary kids really should start school later. It is more beneficial for them in their learning. So we will do the same thing with this, as Mike mentioned with the grading. We will do a public comment period for about 10 days online, get people's feedback. Really, again, looking forward, did we miss anything? I mean, we've tried to think of everything. We've tried to, in our minds, address these issues, but maybe we missed something. So we want to hear that. And yeah, I'll take questions now.
Anyone? Go
Yeah, I
ahead.
have a question. Is the drop-off time the time that the buildings will be accessible in the morning? Or is that just the latest drop-off at the buildings?
Jenny's predicting that all of the elementary buses will arrive right around that 7:25 time. And currently, I believe the schools are open at least 15 to 20 minutes before. I don't know the exact time. So they should be able to get right in or pretty close to it. They shouldn't have to wait outside very long to get into the building.
Okay. So the reason I asked that question is because, like, for schools that have free breakfast and lunch, is that sufficient time to allow for a child to get off the bus, have their breakfast along with 200 other kids, and then get, I know from my kiddo's school, there's the first bell and the second bell. So get, all ready and to start their day by the first bell.
Yeah. We were trying to give them to at least 20 minutes to get into the building, get your breakfast and get to class. We do have some schools that are still doing the breakfast after the bell, so that won't be an issue for those schools. But yeah, we were hoping that 20 minutes was enough time.
So what's the estimated maximum time a student will be on the bus with the new routes? I know you're
OSPI's
looking at back from 2 hours for a maximum.
Sorry, OSPI's recommendation is an hour, and Jenny believes she'll be able to hit that.
Great. That sounds great.
Yep.
So my question is kind of, I think, echoing a little bit Maria's question. Is that time we're seeing 8:15 for the middle schools? Is that the earliest, like, say, a parent now would be able to drop off? And what I'm wondering there is for someone like my family, I drop off at Sunny Slope and then hit Foothills on my way to work to drop the older kid off. And now, if it's great to have that buffer between the school start times, but is that going to be too much for some folks that still want to keep that arrangement? If I can I have to drop my littlest off at 7:40 to hit 7:45, but then I have 30 minutes of what to do with my middle schooler before we can do that. So I know there'll be parents in the same boat. I guess the offset is, hey, maybe now the bus comes later, they can ride the bus, things to think through. But I was just, that's how I read that schedule, and I didn't know. I suspect others will read it that way too. So I just wanted clarification, I guess.
Sure. So interestingly, we have about 35% ridership right now, meaning of those kids who could ride the bus because they're outside that 1 mile boundary, we only have about 35% that do. Jenny's hoping that that now that these rides aren't as long and are more efficient, that more people will ride the bus. So that might help some parents. The other thing is, I know as a building principal, we had the kids waiting outside until a certain time. We had we'd have parents drop kids off at 7 a.m. and we weren't open until 7:45. So it's currently a practice where parents will drop kids off and they just have to wait outside. Now, obviously, if it's cold, we'd let them in. We didn't make them stay outside. We let them into the cafeteria or the library. There's still a piece that we have to figure out with supervision before school, because that is a concern, obviously. And it might mean shifting some of our parapro time from supervision after school to supervision before school, because that's when we're going to see the kids now. And after school is not going to be a big deal because they're going to get right on the bus. So we may have to shift some of that around, and that could help address your question about making sure the kids are supervised and not just running around outside. So there's still some of those nuts and bolts we got to work out, but definitely we've thought about that, and it's a good question.
And is this something that would be implemented with this next school year potentially?
That's the goal.
Okay.
I shouldn't say that. Yes, it will be.
Yeah. Yes, we're doing this.
Yes.
There's too many positives for kids. As Mark was listed, and I'm like, okay, I mean, this is a really good opportunity to support kids and do right by kids again. And making sure the drop off, that's our bus drop off. So that's that exact time. And then, as Mark said, he'll work with principals around what is that acceptable time for parents to be dropping off their kids outside of the transportation piece as well, and working through some of that support before and after school as well.
And so I think maybe that would be an important piece to get better feedback on our stakeholder survey, because if people are focused on the wrong things, they may not evaluate the schedule appropriately. Because otherwise, I think it's great. I've personally never understood why our schools always kind of started at the same time. So this seems logical in what I've seen elsewhere. So if it's got science to back it, I'm good with that.
Yeah, so I'll work with Diana. We had a question ready to go, but I didn't understand your question, obviously, the first time, and then Paul clarified. So yeah, we'll make sure it's clear that that's when the buses will be dropping students off at the school. So we'll rework that question a little bit.
But really pleased with Jenny and Mark and the team for tackling this, because this is one of those big messy things that once you get into transportation, and sometimes it's hard to get yourself out of it and come out clean. But they really just did a thoughtful job of really trying to make sure that they put the kids first. How do we get there? How do we do this? And help it, leaning on the technology. And Mark's been a huge supporter of Jenny's to make sure that our transportation, and that we're going to have the ability to make sure that we know every kid who's on every route going forward starting next year. So he's done a nice job of leading that.
Actually, that brings up a question that I hadn't thought of. I know from some months ago that parents commented on the bus routes being inappropriate. And I was wondering whether in planning the actual routes as well as the schedule, you already engaged, particularly in the south end of Wenatchee, with some of the people that would be using the bus and already have some family input. Is that right or not?
We have not engaged with anybody in the south end. What we've done was earlier this year, we had our techs ride the bus and record every single kid that got on the bus. We then used that to actually pin where the kids live on a map. So Jenny now has that in. We bought this new program called Traversa. And so that is now in Traversa. So this new program can now tell us that bus route doesn't make sense, you should go here, or that bus stop doesn't make sense, you should have a bus stop here. And so that's going to help part of that efficiency. The other piece that I didn't mention, which I should have, is that currently we have schools as bus stops. So we'll have high school kids hanging out, for example, at an elementary school waiting for the bus. That won't happen anymore with this. Schools will no longer be bus stops. So using the technology to help figure out the most efficient route and most efficient stops is going to be key, I think.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Yep.
Just one last thing on my part is, as we're getting input from stakeholders, I think it's real important that, again, we look at more than just sending out a link for a survey or, some electronic format, just because this is going to impact a lot of families in the district. So yeah, just want to put that out there. Let's just be a little bit aware of who we're serving and how we're delivering that information.
Okay.
Will we be sending out, excuse me, flyers in the lunches that are being picked up or anything like that? Surveys in a flyer format for.
We can think about that piece.
Students?
Yeah, no, we can think about that and making sure that we're getting all the response and the feedback that's needed. So I'll talk with Diana tomorrow about that one.
And I just want to say I appreciate this work, having worked with identifying bus routes and my own family. It's been, Mark, I think heard a little bit about it from me earlier this school year, why my kiddo's getting late to school and he rides the bus. So I do appreciate all the time and effort that's being put into this for kids. So kudos.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item. We're going to hear from Larry, I think. We're going to have a budget update.
Yeah, Larry's going to talk to us about the 2019-2020 budget and the impact of COVID and what that looks like currently. And I know we'll also be getting some more financial updates from the state in the coming weeks, and we'll be bringing that also to the board. But I'll hand that over to Larry. And Ron, if we would present that presentation as well.
Larry, are you? Yeah, you want me to unmute you?
Okay, there we are. Okay.
There we go.
Um,
And then if you could turn your camera on, it's your choice, but it'll be a blank box if you don't turn your camera on.
Here we are.
There we go.
there you go.
We
Okay,
see you and hear you.
you got it. Okay, there we are. This is going to be a fairly brief presentation. We've got a lot of unknowns, and you'll see that in the presentation. So I'm just kind of jump in here. Next slide, Ron. Thanks. This is just the budget calendar from our last presentation on February 25th. No, there weren't any changes on here, and I don't perceive that there would be any changes at this point. And we'll just kind of keep you posted. We had on there from May 12th as a possible budget workshop. And then as we get closer to June, provide more detail as we move along. And then we have to adopt the budget on by the end of August. And right now it's scheduled to be adopted on August 25th. So, and we should have from year to year, typically we have a fairly complete budget to the board by June. And so that we can meet our preliminary budget deadline by July 10th. Okay.
But Larry, our contract requirements, correct me if I'm wrong, require us in mid-May to notify people whose contracts we will not be renewing, correct?
Correct. That is correct.
The timing is off on that a little bit, seems.
That is absolutely correct.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, next slide. This is just kind of what's going on in 1920. Right now, we've changed to essential spending only, and we're in the process of collecting data for COVID-19 expenses so that we can claim them, and whenever the funding does come through, so we'll determine what savings we will have for 1920. And right now it looks like, because we're not spending in some areas, I think transportation is a good one. We're not time sheeting much additional time, and we're not spending money on fuel. It's a good example of that. We're probably spending less money on utilities as well. So it's likely our fund balance will grow a little bit this year, and then we'll spend it down the following years. And so only as essential spendings allowed, and this large purchases will require justification. So we'll be monitoring that fairly closely. And we'll keep you posted on that. This slide here gives us some history back to 2008 and 9. And you can kind of see that what I've removed from the slide is running start and dropout re-engagement, since those are pass-throughs. So these are basically our buildings in Valley. And you can see we had an uptick when the Skill Center was added in 2009, 2010. And then you can also see the decline in enrollment that fell out as a result of the Alcoa closing. You can see 2016, 17, some declines there. And then you can see my March 20th, 2020 estimate. It looks like we were up just a little bit, about 40 FTE. And we saw some growth in the middle school. And I've also seen a little bit of external growth in the elementary as well. So we may be getting new families moving in. That's a good sign. But in this model, what I've done is projected what our enrollment would look like with the charter school and without the charter school. So I kind of divided the green line is assuming the charter school doesn't open, and the continuation line is assuming that the charter school will open. And I've used some assumptions. I'm assuming there'll be about 50 kids per grade level. And according to Pinnacles, it looks like they would start in 21, 22 with grades 6 and 7. So you can kind of see the numbers down below. That would translate into about 70 kids for us, I'm assuming. And then it'd be 105 because it'd be adding 35 kids per year from our school district, and be up to 140. And it would max out further down the road at about 240. So they're 245 actually, if it's 35 kids per grade level from our school district. And so you can see the decline. Some of this decline has to do with just ordinary declining enrollment. And part of that has to do with our kinder counts. Our kinders, the district typically had somewhere between 560 and 600 kids, kinder kids in the buildings, in the elementary buildings. And now we're closer to 500. And that started back in October of 2017. And it's been continuing on, and projecting that in 21, 22, it'll drop below 500. So as we have those smaller classes coming in to the school district, we're going to have fewer kids overall in the district. At least that's the prediction right now. And I also took 1% off my projection just to be conservative. We've got the COVID issue going on, and so that is an additional adjustment to the projection. Any questions? Okay. Well, next slide.
Larry, I have a question. When you were talking about kindergarten enrollment, I know normally during the school year, April is kind of the time that people are signing up, enrolling their students for the fall for kindergarten. Has that been happening, or are people doing that online, or is that being held off on right now?
I'll address that for Larry. So I meet with office managers tomorrow to talk about a new process, which will be kind of twofold. One will be Ron is getting his crew, Lori is getting all those forms put online, so that'll happen. And then we're also going to use kind of what Maria suggested, use lunch to hand out the forms, paper pencil. So we were going to start kinder registration Monday, but we're going to push it back a week, give us a little bit more time. And the goal is to have everybody do it online if they can, but if they can't, then we'll have them at the sites, we'll have them at the district office, they can turn them back into the site. So for example, if Newberry does not distribute lunches, but if I go to Washington to get a lunch, I'll pick it up there, I'll drop it off there if I want to, and then the office manager at Washington will distribute it to the appropriate schools. So we don't have to worry about that. So yeah, it's coming up.
historically, we only have about 50% of our parents actually register in April for whatever reason, kinder. So it's a best guess in April, but traditionally about 50%. So that's kind of the number we use in our head, and we reserve spaces because it affects choice. So we reserve spaces, and Maria knows all about that. We reserve spaces now so that when August comes and the rest of the parents enroll, we're not now overloaded in a school because we accepted a bunch of choice.
For this particular year, are we going to maybe hold some additional spaces? Because what concerns me is just speaking as a parent of a kinder that I need to enroll, so thank you for reminding me. But also, I know a lot of these kinder parents, they do kindergarten at private schools or daycares, and I think there's a very real possibility that a lot of these institutions are not coming back after COVID because of hardships and whatnot. So I guess, are we putting a little to the side in case our enrollment is higher than what we imagine because there's no other alternatives?
Yeah, so we do we have a 10% hold of choice. So we can't even, so for example, a kinder class size is 24. We will not take choice more than 10% below that. So I think it's 20, 21 or something like that. So 21 per class. And that then allows expansion at first grade because, for example, Sunny Slope tends to have more kids enroll as first graders than they do as kinder because they keep them in private kindergartens. So we have a space. We can definitely look at that. If for some reason these numbers in April and May look unusually small, then we'll reserve more space for August. It's just, and it's frustrating for parents to get it because they want to know where their kid's going to go to school, but we just say, we can't go above this number for now.
Was that the question you were asking, Julie?
Not necessarily, but that's helpful
sorry.
to know too. But no, it was just, I mean, I assume if we're, I mean, I guess what my concern is that we're talking about just district-wide kinder enrollment is lower and has historically been lower. And what I'm fearing is based on rumors and gossip with what's happening with COVID is that some of these places that you might otherwise send these private schools you might otherwise send your kinder to are not going to exist anymore. And so I'm wondering, I want to make sure that choice being one thing, but the district is prepared to maybe see a higher enrollment in general than they might see otherwise.
Just connecting those dots there. So we're going to hold, like we do each year, hold on that choice until that later August, so we can make sure that the boundaried students have those first right to be into those classes, that K class or that first grade class, as you're talking about, because there is tons of unknown in this. I mean, that's probably the theme of the night. It is unknown. What's going to happen? What happens to these businesses? Do they survive? Do they not survive? And then do those kids come to us? So we have a little flex. And as Mark said, it's sometimes frustrating for some of the parents who've choiced into whatever school that we're not telling them right away, but it's for these reasons, because we got to first service the boundaried area kids for Mission View. So we got to make sure everybody within that boundary has the school that they're assigned to. And then once we're assured that everybody is registered to go there, then we can start moving in kids of choice. So that gives us that a little bit of room for our grade levels. Back to you, Larry.
All right. Okay, so we're talking about 2021 budget challenges, and we've been talking about the 1% regionalization challenge, and that will be with us through the year 24-25. And we'll be losing about 1% of our, well, it is actually 1% allocation to our apportionment model, which earlier I think I said it was close to 500, but when I did the math actually with the formula itself, it looks like it's closer to 400,000. So the first impact that we'll see is in year 2021, and that will multiply on out. So it'd be 400,000 impact on this coming year, by 24-25, the impact is about $2 million. So each year will have an increasing impact from that. We're also, LEA, the LEA model, the local effort and assistance model changed. And so it's no longer calculated relative to the larger districts, more wealthy districts like King County and Snohomish. It's based on just plain assessed valuation growth. And so as our assessed valuation grows, our allocation for local effort and assistance goes down. And kind of give you an example, our allocation went down about $300,000 this year compared to last year. And I'm predicting next year it's probably not going to be a big change, but then it may be as much as $200,000 or $300,000 in future years, just depending on the growth of our assessed valuation. The faster our assessed valuation grows, the less local effort and assistance we get. Another challenge is just setting the levy for 2021. We'll have to have some discussions about that, and also dealing with declining enrollment. We talked about that in the birth rates, and it was quite a cliff that we saw come in October of 2017. It was quite a fall off of new students coming in, and pretty significant, and we're going to start feeling that here pretty soon. We've also have complete uncertainty under state and federal funding. Not sure exactly how this will impact, the COVID issue will impact our federal allocations and or state allocations. Back during the Great Recession, there was a mid-year adjustment of apportionment. And so there's been no talk about that, although there is that possibility. So we'll have to be prepared. And tax collections is also a possibility if the economy doesn't get started up quickly enough. There will be some more foreclosures or late payments. June's going to be fine. December probably will be fine for us as well in 2020, but it'll be the following year is where we'll probably see some impacts, just depending on how quickly the economy gets going. And then again on the impact of enrollment due to the charter school. And we kind of talked about that. Starts off with an impact of 70 kids, and that goes up to 245 by 2026, 27. Okay, and next slide. And this slide is just kind of give you kind of some facts in regards to the CARES Act funding that's coming down from the feds. You can see that there was about $30.7 billion allocated for education for the nation. And it sounds like a lot of money, but a think tank is indicating that just this last week was saying that it's more like schools will need more like 70 billion over the next 2 or 3 years. So it's still somewhat not, it's only about a third of what they're calculating what's going to be needed. About 475,000 of that will come to the state of Washington, and about 213,000 of that will go to elementary and secondary education.
Is that million or thousand?
Oh, thousands. 213 million will come to the Washington State for elementary and secondary ed. So of 13.2 billion. So they've got, and kind of what I was trying to show here is that there's 3 different levels of allocation. There's an allocation to elementary and secondary ed. There's an allocation to a government emergency relief fund, and those things are all kind of being split out. And there's going to be a government emergency relief fund, and for $3 billion, and about 60 million of that will come to Washington State, and it's going to be allocated to significantly impacted K-12 or higher ed. So that's up to the governor to decide how that allocation process will work. And so at this point, we don't know exactly how much is going to be coming to the state of Washington. I heard just word in the news that the allocation's on its way, and so the governor's office is working on that. So we'll give you more in the future as that comes down. And some of the information I've been reading too is that they are indicating that we might not want to spend the money all in the first year. We might want to hold on to it for a year until other things occur. So, and the money is being allocated via the Title I formula. And that Title I formula emphasizes poverty. And that may benefit us a little bit more than just a straight allocation as a based on our FTE. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. So any questions?
I have a prediction.
Oh, yeah.
Our kindergarten enrollment's going to go up in about 5 years.
The coronavirus kids.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one. That's a good prediction. Yeah. We'll watch for that.
So Larry, you had back with the enrollment as a prediction next year of our enrollment slightly trending down again. Do you foresee, have you guys talked about whether there are going to be necessary staff cuts or anything like that, or is it too early to say?
You know, at this point, it's a little bit early to say because of the unknowns. We've heard that we're good through December, hearing word from the governor's office. But after that, we're not quite sure, you know, what's going to happen. It's all dependent on how quickly the economy gets going. And, you know, do we get up and running? State of Washington is dependent on sales tax. And that's consumer based. And if we shut down consumerism, you know, then the revenue is not going to flow. And one thing that Paul was talking about, the economic forecast was set to come out at the end of May, I believe, and they kind of pushed up a preliminary economic forecast for the end of this month. So it'll be, well, this week, supposedly they're supposed to come out with a preliminary forecast, and that'll kind of give us a rough estimate about what, you know, what the state, the condition of the state is going to be in. And one good thing for us is we are K-12, and a lot of what is funded for basic ed is protected, and unlike other agencies, unfortunately. So we'll just kind of see how that plays out as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. We're good to move on?
Yeah,
Okay,
the board's
great.
good.
Next item on the agenda is, excuse me, board communication. And I think Martin had something he wanted to share. Maybe other board members do as well.
And you're ready for me to shoot my mouth on that one, okay?
You betcha.
Okay. The board would like to give a short address at graduation as recognition, and I guess you could call it compensation. And we were trying to get, I called it a sketch for all the board members to chew over, think about, and add to. So Laura and I were asked to be the starting subcommittee on that, and it's mostly her positive message was to say, you know, this is just a couple of months, not just, it's a huge couple of months, but it's your whole K-12 career. You are prepared and believe in yourself. So that was one. And then the other was using the word empathy. So I think, Laura, should I just read what is drafted? Because I don't think we've got it to put on the screen.
Sure.
And then we can send it out to people to look at. Is that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Believe this, you, the Wenatchee High School class of 2020, are prepared. You worked and learned and climbed through every grade to be ready for this graduation moment. The fact that the final months of your senior year were different from anything you imagined takes nothing away from your achievement. In fact, you've learned a rare and valuable lifetime skill, how to survive and respond to disruption and adversity. You will be stronger and better equipped to deal with other surprises that the world after high school will throw at you. Have faith in be proud and have faith in yourselves. We are sorry that you've been deprived of treasured celebrations with your classmates and your teachers, things that you and your families had anticipated for a long time. We do not know how to comfort you about this other than to join with you in looking forward to returning to normalcy with friendships and social activities. Perhaps you will be that special class with the best stories of what life with the pandemic was like. You have our trust and confidence as you step out into the world. Go for it. We wish you happiness and fun and the satisfaction of earning your successes in the years ahead. The intent of that was just to have a skeleton for everybody to add to, take from, wordsmith, see whether it's in the right mood place. One of the things we were trying not to do was get in the way of the classic inspiration of the teacher of the year or the alum. Do something that's more of a comfort, low-key word from the board with empathy and pride in the students.
So if you like the direction, we'll just keep refining it. If you have specific ideas, throw them our way. Yeah, okay,
It's good.
great.
Could
Thank
you guys send that out to the whole board so we can just, I always like to see the written
Yeah,
form.
Sure.
I assume Kim can distribute that. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else on the board have communications this evening?
I just want to thank Paul and Mike and Larry and Mark for their presentations. And I know there's been so much work on the transportation piece and the budget piece and the grading piece. And you guys have spent a lot of hours putting all those parts together. So thank you again. And we just look forward to continuing to work on all these issues by your side. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And it's a number of teachers and our Teachers Association, our Classified Association. It really is a team. And that's probably what I'm most proud of, is just the team and teaming with the board, teaming with our staff and our educators to do right by kids. And that's something that we don't close our eyes too early anymore around here. But when we do put our heads down on our pillow, we feel really good about what we're trying to do for our kids. We're not perfect by any stretch, but we're trying to do it together and trying to really listen to different partners to do the best we can for our kids. So thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. All right, Paul, Superintendent's report.
We've got a really cool celebration. Columbia Elementary was recognized by the state for growth for students who qualified for free and reduced lunch programming and students identified as white. So really pleased with that and with the transformation from the state on how they're grading and assessing our student or our schools. It really does take into consideration growth, achievement at the state level and at the local level to recognize the hard work. But I'm super proud of Cy, his leadership team, the teachers, the support staff, because like what I just talked about with our team and our cabinet team and everybody else, it truly takes a team at the school level to move student performance forward. But I'm grateful for the leadership that Cy brings each and every day to Columbia Elementary. And that's not to say that our other schools don't, because we're blessed to have the leaders we do, but really proud of Columbia Elementary and the work that they're doing each and every day for kids. And thinking about that, I mean, this whole theme tonight was all about kids, trying to make the best decisions for kids, and Columbia Elementary, exemplifies that type of work, trying to do the best things for our kids. The last piece I would say is, I mentioned it earlier, just a thank you, a sincere thank you to our teachers. Man, they are working it. They are working it each and every day. And I think about our educators who have young kids at school, who are trying to do homeschool themselves, who are trying to put on school for 25 to 30 kids. Or I think about our educators whose spouse is a first responder, or who's really out there making a difference in our communities and helping our community thrive. And I think about our staff members who have parents who have some significant illnesses and the stress and the strain. But each and every day, our teachers, our staff continue to show up. And I know they're stressed. And I know that it's really challenging time right now. But I know, and I know the board believes the same thing. We are so proud of our educators. Next week is Teacher Appreciation Week, but we'll kick it off a little early by saying thank you for what you do for our students in this, as Mike had said, in this unprecedented time, where who would have known 6 weeks ago, this is how we're delivering education. And we're trying to figure out a little bit better every day. And I love the fact that so many, I mean, our educators, all they want to do is do right by their kids, and they are. So just really proud to be the superintendent of such an incredible school district full of compassionate, caring, dedicated people. That is it for me.
In a spirit of teacher appreciation, can I just share one really quick? My favorite phone call of the day today was Mr. Dodson, the PE teacher for Sunny Slope, called my son via my cell phone because his teacher had reported that he did some little trick thing great. So it was absolutely fantastic to see the communication between the teachers of, hey, so-and-so student in my class did this really cool thing, and that's getting reported back, and then gets a phone call to the kiddo that says, hey, Brady, I heard you did all this great stuff today. Miss Martin told me, and it was the highlight of his day. It was the coolest phone call I got. And we've now, as I think teachers are adjusting to communicating with each other and with their students, I feel like we're seeing more of that. And it's so uplifting for them. And it was just fun, a great moment. And so a good way to, start the Teacher Appreciation Week. I'm proud of them, and it's been good for them to reach out to the kids. I like seeing that.
Very
Thank
nice.
you, Julie.
Anyone else? Okay, the board will now go into recess into executive session for a period of 30 minutes to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a staff member. Pursuant to district policy number 1410 and RCW 42.30.110, this discussion will be closed to the public. The school board is not expected to take final action following the executive session. And I already said that we'd be in there about 30 minutes. Okay, so Ron, if you could make that happen for us, we would appreciate it.